Thank you for joining us. I am Cheryl Wilson Griffin. I am the CEO here at Legal Tech Consultants, and we are a tech consultancy that's really focused on making legal technology more accessible for everyone. So whether you're a big firm, small firm, legal tech company, corporate legal department, we're trying to make information useful, accessible, and understandable as well for everyone. And so this series that you've joined today is part of a wider 6-part series that I'm working on adding a 7th one called AI for Smart People. And so what we've done here is we've brought together this series of kind of subject matter experts in all these different areas of AI to talk about the different kind of things we should be thinking about, the different tools available, the different methodologies we should be thinking about. And today we have one of my faves, but I'll jump into that for a second. Let me tell you what's left in the series, and then we'll jump into Shawnna. What we have left in the series, we have 3 series left, so this is the 3rd one. November 1st, next week, we have Kat Casey. Very excited about that. She's going to talk to us about the fact that eDiscovery has been using a lot of this stuff for a long time. And she'll also talk to us about what Reveal and she has in mind for where we're going next in the eDiscovery universe. Following that, on November 8th, we have Summer Hackley, a recruiter, talking to us about where do we get the talent? How are we going to find all these people to work with us in these new roles that will be coming out? And then November 15th, we'll be talking with a couple of founders, Kathy Zhu and Eric Baum, about real and safe ways to use tools that are AI based today. So they're not generative AI. They're things that are smaller but still useful, right? Automated things that you can use that aren't going to give your risk officer a stroke, right? So those types of things. And so this episode, which I'm very excited about, features Shawnna Hoffman, who's one of the only people who I'm willing to call a legal AI expert. She's been doing this a long time, and she is literally one of the only people that I think can really hang herself out. There's a handful, and she's one of them. And so I would love to jump into this topic today, where we're going to talk about what are kind of the guardrails? What do we need to be thinking about? What do we need to be talking about for governance right now before we do anything crazy and screw up our whole world? I think one of the really cool things is that we're in kind of a clean space right now. It's like when you get a nice database or a brand new computer and there's nothing screwed up on it yet, right? That's kind of where most of us are today. And so this session is like, what do we do to not make it worse, right? And so with that, I would love, Shawnna, if you could give us some background, tell us about yourself and your kind of journey through this wacky world of legal and AI.
Absolutely. I would say that my number one skill set is curiosity.
Yes.
So as I have been in the legal industry, actually, my parents owned a court reporting agency. So I started working as a court reporter way early, back when I was 16, way earlier than I would ever have my kids learn about the realities of life that young. But I worked a lot of personal injury cases, saw some crazy stuff. When I was 18, went to go work at McGraw-Hill, started off as a paralegal, and then my career grew from there. I always thought that I would be a lawyer, but then I love technology. And so I was fortunate. My high school after school job was actually working at Shepherd's McGraw-Hill, for those attorneys remembering shepherdizing, and they paid for my college. So I went ahead and stayed there and worked in the corporate legal department. And when LexisNexis had bought Shepherd's, I had the wonderful fortune to move to LexisNexis. And that's really where, I was always the one that they'd say, hey, go to her. You need anything, on the computer, go to Shawnna, because I was always fascinated with it. I was coding way early on, just for the fun of it. And I would code as an editor. I would actually code a lot of the things that I was like, oh, this mistake repeats throughout an entire document. I can go in and change it once. And then of course my colleagues next to me were going, oh, wait, how'd you do that, Shawnna? So I would go in and code theirs. And it was, we were getting through a lot more of those manuscripts a lot quicker, way back, during my early years at McGraw-Hill. When I moved to LexisNexis, that was when attorneys were moving from books to CD-ROM. I swear this happened within a 2-year span to online. It was just like as quick as you could get. The attorneys were going, what is it? I remember taking a huge long phone cord so that we could dial up. Remember dial up? Dial onto LexisNexis. I had a 100-foot cord. I would actually go and go to clients' meetings with. At the end of the 90s, I was very fortunate. I had someone call me saying, "Hey, we have this new industry. We don't know what we're calling it, but we want somebody with your background." And I moved to Theos, if you remember, one of the first e-discovery companies. I got to work with some amazing people and really dove into understanding computer forensics, how it's used in the courtroom. I had my own e-discovery company, and then from there went after we sold that into consulting. And my consulting years, one of the questions I was always asked by attorneys and judges was, did you collect all the data? Which honestly, my last one, I just wanted to laugh. I'm like, oh, stop asking me this question, because it's just an impossible ask and answer, because data is everywhere. And anyone who has uncovered, anybody who's worked in technology, but anyone who's uncovered the various different data sources for e-discovery cases is shocking. And I really started to do a lifelong search, is what I feel like, for the answers that, to be able to answer that question. So when I saw Watson win Jeopardy at IBM, I thought, oh, AI is my answer. I was really sure of it. And so I wrote up a whole business plan. It was about 100 pages. I was very fortunate. Brian Kuhn, also not even knowing me, had written up his business plan. So when I went to pitch that to IBM on my first day, he also had been pitching that. And so they combined the two of us. We had an amazing practice for about a decade, and we're working with corporate legal departments all over the world. And governments, which governments actually a few of them are at war now, unfortunately, but we've had some really great opportunity to talk about AI and really learn those lessons. And the one lesson that I learned throughout that time was that you need guardrails, because AI is a probabilistic model. Now, AI is 90 different things, or 90 plus different things. We've got advanced analytics that sometimes gets pulled into it. So when people say AI, I'm like, which one? Most of the time right now it's generative AI, but there are so many of the traditional things that are thought of being AI that are actually even better answers for some of the problems we're trying to solve. And so the guardrails are really important, because as it is a probabilistic model, it's never going to be 100% correct. So we have, like, one of my hospitals that I'm working with right now, one of the questions that they said is, how do we fix that? And you can't. And unfortunately, it could be up to the answers from the generative AI could be up to 26% incorrect. And if that is the case, you could kill somebody. So it's very dangerous. And these guardrails, we believe in the human perspective. So the people in the process side of the discussions versus it being a technology. Technology to technology, they're not good with, guardrailing themselves. We really need to have that human perspective. So anyways, long story short, that's how I got to where I am today. And I'm the president of Guardrail Technologies. And I love it. It's been a lifelong dream of mine. So
I love it. And so now you're working with corporations and law firms. Like, who all do you work with these days?
Literally everybody. So right now, the regulated industries are really struggling. They're going, we know that we need generative AI, but how do we put this in place? And because I've been working in it, and our team has been working in AI for over 20 years, we really have I think, a great understanding of where AI is today and how it can help. And then also being able to put those guardrails, those safeguards in place on those projects, so that, it's like those lessons learned. Let me come in and help you as your BFF to make sure that the lessons we've learned throughout the years, you don't make those same mistakes, and makes it a lot easier.
Right, crash and burn. Right, it's a great way to put it. I want to be your BFF and help you avoid the things that I've already screwed up once. And I always think, like, the things I try to remember and take forward are always the things that I wish that I did differently. Right, like the things I did good, yes, those seem to burn in there, but the bad things are the things that I want to share with the world. Like, don't do this. I wouldn't do it this way again. Right.
Well, so when Brian and I led the IBM Watson practice, I actually started a book of the lessons learned. So I've got this book I've started, that's a couple hundred pages already of all these lessons learned throughout the years. And it's great, because some of that, I'll even go back to it myself going, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Because you literally run into the same situations over and over again, especially in the regulated industries. So I just wrote a letter in a response to the SEC requesting response to their AI regulations. And I immediately looked at it. It's 250 pages, but even the first couple of pages, concerned me. And then as I read through the entire thing, I thought we've got some good in here, but we also have we've learned that does not work. And so I was able to respond to the SEC and others as those come out too. We're trying to really make sure we're sharing and educating because, I mean, especially when it comes out in regulation, that could be extremely burdensome and costly, which is not good.
Right. That's a little bit terrifying. And we don't have the regulations on our list, but maybe we should talk about that too a little bit.
Absolutely.
Love it. Okay, cool. Well, let's jump in. And the one thing I forgot to tell everyone, if you have questions along the way, please throw them in the chat or throw them in the Q&A. So if you see me looking away, Shawn, I'm not, screwing around. I'm working on questions, taking notes. But do throw them in the chat. We'll either work them in at the moment or work them at the end, but we will get to all your questions. So don't worry about that. So let's jump in. I think one of the things you and I talked about when we connected for a couple of minutes is this idea of overselling AI. Can you talk to us a little bit about that concern? Because I loved what you had to say on that.
Oh, it was painful. So when I first started at IBM, one of my first jobs was as the chief of staff for one of the largest divisions, and that was cognitive and analytics. And one of the things that we saw immediately was the salespeople overselling AI, almost like, oh, it's like, the Jetsons.
Magic.
And it's going to clean everything for us. So at the overselling, unfortunately, ended up in the contracts, which ended up being a contractual issue. And so we had to go into the first 40 Watson projects, really dive into them saying, okay, in reality, here is what's available today with your data set, which is that data set is king in everything, or queen, or both. The data sets are extremely important. So do we know our sources? Because you can have the most amazing AI system set up. If those data sources have bias in them, or if they have, so many scary things that they could have in them, or if they're just not good data sources and they don't match the outcomes you're looking for, it just makes no sense. So it starts to be a workflow issue. So with that, the salespeople really had to be retrained. So we went out globally and retrain the sales force saying, okay, here's the boundaries of AI, but then also you have to do the scoping sessions up front. Anyone who's buying AI or working in AI or having a consulting team come in, you have to do those scoping sessions, because if you don't get to know the data, you're lost. And actually, I had somebody say, oh, we have millions of dollars and these use cases, how much would it be? And I'm like, it's actually tens of millions of dollars you would need for that many use cases. So I think there's a really big misunderstanding of, people coming in and saying, oh, well, if it's just automation, then we should be able to do it for 3 million. Well, no. This is not just automation. This is a probabilistic machine. And it's not the analytics lifestyle that we used to live. This is, you've got to just keep on pressing and testing and making sure those are short sprints so you're getting it right, and making sure your data scientists are on the team. And when we had first built Watson Legal, the one thing that was a lesson learned is we needed, for our first project, 6 data scientists to really go in and massage the data to make sure the data was answering the questions the right way.
Is there, and this is slightly off topic, but I think one of the questions I've seen asked a lot online is whether or not there's anything out there or any guidelines around, how do I know, how do I make that jive? How do I know that I'm not being oversold? Or are there rating systems on any of these AI? How do I know that how accurate it is? Is there anything like that kind of out there yet?
Yeah, so Larry Bridgesmith and I just built a model using an original model that our company had come out with. So it's funny that you asked that. That wasn't even
that's a plan. That's not even on the list.
A responsible AI reference model that we've built that really helps the industry. And we'll be coming out with that in the next couple of weeks so that anyone can use it. That's kind of our give back to the industry. My company already has a data science reference model for our data scientists, and dives into everything, as you can imagine, all of the I don't even know what you want to call them, the negatives that AI could cause in society, and make sure that that does not happen. So, and then also in regards to cost, what does that look like? In e-discovery, we had our little model that it was, you could plug and play in. Of course, that grew throughout the years, but Larry and I've come up with the same thing so that people can get an idea of what it really should cost. But then again, that's going to vary depending on the data sets.
I was just talking to someone about cost yesterday, and they were like, what do you think this is going to cost? How do you think e-discovery is going to be priced? And I was like, I'm waiting for someone to tell me that, because there's so much with, depending on, what kind of model you're using and how it calls back to home base and all those kinds of, agents, what it's using and what it's doing, I think it'll be interesting to see how e-discovery makes that work and how the heck.
I'm excited for the e-discovery industry in general, and where it steps next, because we had back in the early 2000s digital mandate, if you remember.
Yep.
Bobby Basile was working on that. Yep. Very impressive. I mean, that was probably one of the first. I would actually consider that AI systems in the industry, maybe the first. And I think there were great opportunities with it. It was definitely ahead of its time because it was hard to get clients to put their head around, oh, you only have to review a small data set.
Right.
That's what we're seeing going forward, is some of these really smart systems to where you can start to ask the questions and it'll respond back. We had built that with Watson. Of course, it was a little more expensive than most lawyers wanted to pay for, but you can get some pretty high accuracy. You just have to, again, fact check once you get responses back. I
think discovery is probably going to be the #1 place where this type of tool is going to make life way better for everyone. People won't be locked in basements reviewing documents. Like it's probably going to kill some vendor models, but hopefully they'll get on the new program and be able to. Yeah, well, and there's better opportunities to educate the teams. I was just actually, Larry and I were just talking yesterday about the different types of jobs that people could get, and it is the concern of how do we move them from here to here. Right. Because there's more jobs here. Like there's this amazing set of jobs here, but it's the education component that needs to happen, that really it's a chasm that they have to jump. Yep. And some people will be able to jump that chasm and others won't. And so it's trying to figure out how do we then find the ones that can make it over the chasm. And then for the others, we have to educate them into other areas that make to make sense for their skill set. Yeah. Or where they want to be in life in general. Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. So let's turn to governance and guardrails and kind of talk about the kinds of work you're doing today with clients and how you're kind of helping them think about their guardrails. And I think one of the things you talked about was assessments. Yes. Well, and I think assessments are extremely important up front. We have many clients that we've got actually a funny comic strip that we found at our company where it shows an IT guy with like a business person saying, I want to use AI. And the IT guy goes, well, what do you want to use it for? I don't know, but I know I need to use it. And that's kind of the answer that we're seeing across the board. I don't know what I'm doing with it. And so one of the things that we've had our clients do is to go out and survey and ask for problem statements. And sometimes we're getting, anywhere between like 60 to 80 problem statements that we're getting back from the clients. And then from there, we can start to assess them to say, okay, here is where the AI can fit. And here's more of an automation, here's more of an analytics. So you start to parse through those to understand what the needs are, because we have amazing employees in these companies. They definitely see parts of their jobs that can be, we'll say, automated or made easier. And they're excited to use the technology. They just don't know where it fits. And so at that point, then of course, it's the quick wins. Let's do some pilots up front. And then from those pilots, you get to know the data sets. And from knowing the data sets, then you can give other recommendations. So it starts to be a relationship type of program versus and vendor relationship with them versus it being a one and done like we've seen in the past. Because AI, if we remember, it was made by humans for humans. Right. It's fallible. There's lots of problems with it, but it also is a great asset to our world to make our lives easier. And I have
three not yet so young kids, 23-year-old, 21 and 18. And they use AI every day, and they're talking to Siri. They're on with people over the world. My son, we were just in Japan. He had learned Japanese before we went, thank God, because I needed assistance much of the time. I was like, I need to know the background of what this is, because I need to be able to tell my friend, and tell me in Japanese what it is, or tell me in English. You talk in Japanese to this beautiful little old lady, wonderful lady who had made this pottery for us. So anyways, long story short, it's amazing to see what our young generations are coming up with, and it's their day to day, and it's no big deal. And privacy also is very different to them. They walk in, at least my three, they go, well, we know we don't have privacy. Well, that is a very, very different generation than I grew up in. To us, privacy is everything. The Matrix was shocking. And to my kids, the Matrix is like, well, who cares where you live, in a fake world or a real world? Do you like the world you're in?
Yes. Oh, God, you packed so much into that. Yeah. Well, what? It was very interesting. Some of the things that you hit upon there too, we talked about a little bit last week with Dr. Flora Blindenblack, which was kind of opportunistic approach, right? Like bringing the ideas for AI up from organically from the populace, as opposed to top down declaring these are what we're going to work on with our AI projects or our innovation projects, right? So ask the people who are doing the work, what are the problem statements, right? So bring it up. That's the best way to get motivated participants, which is another thing she talked about you needing. And then the idea of starting small and then stacking your wins, right? So once you know what's in there, you kind of peek below the hood, you figured it out, you can then keep building from there. So I love how all these sessions are tying in. I love it when a plan comes together. Who knew that was an option? So let's talk about one of the things you said to me, which I really loved, was the idea of putting controls around the outcomes as opposed to around the technology, the AI itself. Can you talk a little bit about what people should be thinking about and looking for there?
Yes. So when I was testifying in front of the U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Commission, I testified for about 3 years on blockchain, and then, of course, the advanced technologies that surrounded blockchain at the time. So one of the questions that one of the commissioners had asked is, should we be regulating AI? And I thought that was a brilliant question, and my answer was no. And my answer to him specifically was to make sure we regulate the outcome, because AI is 90 different things, and anyone is going to be able to get away with calling it something else, something different, and being able to describe it differently. So there are so many loopholes, and I have brilliant friends who have figured out all the loopholes in life. And I said, really, do we care what they use? Honestly, don't really care, as long as the outcomes are good for society and they're not detrimental to society. And so for me, that perspective, and I also shared that with the SEC this last week, was to make sure that we look at the outcomes themselves. And what does that actually mean? Is there bias in the outcomes? I really think of it in two different ways. I think of it data in and data out. The AI hopefully is doing what it's supposed to be doing in a very, smart manner. It's a very smart system, as we're talking about here today. The data in could be your biggest problem. And also that data in, if it's very biased data, we're going to get biased data on the outset. A good example is Amazon. Years ago when, that's not that even that long ago, not too long ago, Amazon had trained, their HR had AI, being trained on a specific data set. They're like, oh, these are all of our engineers that we're looking for, computer technologists, but did not really look at the resumes. And so what was happening is they were all male resumes. There were no females in the mix. So someone like me and someone like you, even though we were qualified, because we didn't match what the AI was looking for, because we were females, even if we had all the qualifications, would not have made it past, because it didn't match, according to the AI, what they were looking for and the pattern of the other individuals they've hired before. And so we start to see this pattern matching as being an issue, because we don't want to get overly patterned, because all of a sudden then you have only one type of individual, for example, being hired.
Gosh, that's terrifying. I have not heard about that, but yeah, that's terrifying. And I think, it's interesting. One of the things I was just thinking about was, in GDPR, there's a right to, if there's automated decision making involved, you have a right for a human to ask for a human review, right? So I think it sounds like that's kind of the same type of thing that you're talking about here. I mean, not necessarily that specific right, but the same kind of thing that we have to be thinking about what the outcome is and making sure that there can be a human to override it if,
Absolutely.
yeah, if things aren't checking out, let's call it.
Yeah, I mean, just the same as we do with e-discovery, it's important for the human to always have the last say. So the system that we've built makes sure that the humans stay in control the entire process, and in the end, not only just has the right to, and also the right to say, no, that's not correct information, knows what possibly could not be correct information. So we start to see, what our guardrails, really are fact checking. It's the contradiction finding, looking at the data sets, and we've got some complex algorithms that run to make sure that those are not biased and have other issues.
So kind of a checksum, if you will, on kind
Yes.
of the outcomes. Yeah, that makes sense. And then when whether it's a firm or corporation or anyone, really, when you're thinking about AI as a technology, really you want to apply the same rules that you're applying elsewhere, right? So the same kind of data privacy, you want to look at it from the same place, InfoSec, all those same types of things, right?
Yep.
Just kind of take the same approach. Don't necessarily treat it as a brand new animal, because it's really not.
No, it's not at all. It does, like with Gen AI, if we think about it, it's a large language model. We've had small language models. That's what AI has been in the past. All that this is doing is going to huge data sets. Now, could we have built this 20 years ago? Probably not, because we didn't have the large data sets we have today. The reason it organically grew to where it is today is because we have the amount of data, and it made sense to be the next step in the process.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a talk a couple of weeks ago on the future of legal tech, and my favorite point is we produce 1.1 trillion megabytes of data per day. It's like, so we have big data sets now. It's available.
Yeah, and if you look at that growth, I don't have my chart with me, but if we look at that growth, it is like exponentially crazy. Even just this past year with Gen AI. So AI was not cool. I used to not be the cool chick. Now I am, which is kind of fun. People are coming to me going, oh, wait, that thing you told us 5 years ago? Well, I didn't pay attention, and tell me more about it, which is kind of funny. But yeah, as we look at like where it's morphed into, it's been just this past year. And the difference is AI used to be very expensive. Right. Now, because of OpenAI providing it for free to anyone who wanted to use it, all of a sudden they see the power that was only available to a few. Now everyone has it. Now there is the good, the bad, and unfortunately the extreme ugly with that, because we do have some nefarious individuals who are using AI. And I have heard over the next 18 months that they believe that over $1 trillion in fraud will be lost. Or lost due to fraud. So it is also a scary thing. So be protecting yourselves. Also make sure you have those passwords, just like we used to do as we were kids. If somebody else is going to pick you up, they know the password, and ask them, where was I last night? Or what did we have for dinner? Something so that you actually know it's a human versus it being an AI system that is trying to manipulate you to get money or to scare you.
Right, because we're hearing tons of things where kids are calling grandmas, but it's really an AI mock voice. And it's, if you have not gone out and seen or tried some of these tools that are out there, they sound exactly like you. And if you're someone like Shawnna or I, or Jerry Bowie, where there's video out of your voice or sound of your voice, anyone can make your voice. It is wildly easy. So, and probably anyone can make your video too. So it's terrifying.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my goodness. Oh, so there was testimony. I don't know if you guys caught that. So the Commerce Committee had testimony from AI experts, and and I won't say who it is, one of the actors from Marvel actor was on there. So I was super excited. I was like, I got to attend this. It's public, so you guys could all watch it later. I can send out if you're interested. Message me, I'll send it out to you. But he had stated, so someone had created an AI version of him doing very nasty things, and his wife found it.
Oh no.
Online. Yes.
Mm.
And he's like, it seemed like me. It acted like, he was being kind of tongue in cheek, like that would have been fun. But he's like, it wasn't me. And he's like, here it's out. He goes, I'm a dad with, he had lots of kids, dad with lots of kids. I've been married for 30 years. I think it was a long time he'd been married. And he's like, and here this is out on me and I have no control of it. And
Right.
that is the scary, scary part, because right now we've got massive copyright issues. One of the presentations I went to recently, they were talking about an author who had a book come out on Amazon, and people were reaching out to her going, "Oh, we love your new book." She's like, "I haven't written one." And she goes and looks, and it's her name. It is literally the likeness of what she would write. Somebody had used AI saying, write whatever it was, write this book in the style of this author. And it came out, and Amazon actually, they argued for quite a while until she went to social media stating, you don't have your name copyrighted, so anyone can do it. So we've got some major legal issues that will be occurring because people can use other people's likeness. And if you don't have your name copyrighted, that's an issue. But I can't even imagine. Lawyers going to be busy.
Right.
So busy. I don't know why the legal profession is not realizing this at this point. I'd be jumping in on top of all these cases going, because there's data sets being used. I mean, who knows what OpenAI ChatGPT was trained on? It was 17 terabytes of what? No one knows. And likelihood is it's a lot of copyrighted data. And I know there's already lawsuits on that, but
I think it's going to be really interesting, the outcome of those lawsuits too, because I think even if the lawsuits fail, which there's some fair use, maybe arguments, what about the secondary uses? Like there's for sure going to be outputs that are the same, like me and someone else are going to get the same outputs at some point in the future, and we're going to publish or use it and then do it. I know I don't have copyright protection, but what if somebody sues me for it? And then I say, I created it through ChatGPT. You know what I mean? So like there's no work going away, lawyers. More work is coming. Learn this stuff, you'll be rich forever. There's so much work coming.
Statement.
Yes, there's no work going away. There's no jobs being, there might be old jobs changing, but there's new work coming.
Oh yeah, the estimate is that over the next year, over 30 million more jobs that have AI components will be added just here in the US. So yeah, it is definitely a brighter place than it is darker.
I think that's right. And I've been telling everybody, I think we're in the golden age of legal technology too around this. I think where I know nobody believes me. Don't worry, there's going to be a webinar on it, but it's a new world. I've been doing this 20 years. I've been begging people to get excited about legal tech, and now it's here. So it's happening. Get excited. You're going to hear more about it.
I love that, Cheryl. And I'm on your bandwagon. I'm there.
It's happening. It's really happening this time. So let's talk about AI committees and kind of who needs them, what the heck are they, how do we form them, what should they be doing? So I know that's a lot of questions, but like, does everyone need them?
So first off, depending on the size of the company and the data sets, for the larger companies, we're working a lot with the Fortune 1000, and they already are starting to put those governance committees in place. I was working with one of the big banks a couple days ago, and I was super excited. They just hired an AI ethicist. And I was like, you're my best friend. This is just like a great opportunity, to really look at AI from that perspective. And as we start to look at what those governance committees should look like, we really need to cover all of the different types of individuals in the world. And one of my favorite people that I run things by all the time is a good friend of mine who's an actor, and he is not into technology, not at all, but I run things by him because it gives me really good perspectives from an outside in type of view. And so we really need to think about it, not just the normal diversity, but really getting even neurodiverse and also into different, occupations, really starting to look at our data sets and look at the outcomes that we're looking for in those governance structures, setting it up so that we have everyone included. My favorite governance structure that we put together when I was at IBM had, of course, the executive committee, but if you were to look at it, there was a liaisons. So all the way down on the governance structure was every department in the company. And every department in the company had responsibilities to put together their committees. And then we looked at them going, oh, well, we would recommend also these other individuals joining because they're going to have more of a diverse perspective. And it really was filling out and making sure that everyone had a voice at the table. And then we had HR involved in it. And so you start to see a full governance structure where every department in the company had a say and was invited to that table. Because that table with AI affects everyone and everything. So we really need to make sure those governance structures are built out. Now that's, of course, they were, a large Fortune 1000. For some of the smaller companies, again, it's reaching outside, reach across the table, find out the other side and what they're thinking. And also there are a few of us who've been in AI for forever. I'm always happy to answer questions. You're going, okay, am I going down this right direction? Have you experienced this before? I will be very honest with you, because some of the things that people ran across, I'm like, I haven't experienced that before, but man, it's not a good idea either. That's going to cause problems in society. Please don't build that. I've said, please don't build that more than a dozen times in my life. Like, oh, no, you can't. And here's the other thing. Oh my goodness. Make sure this is my favorite phrase. Can you do it? Yes. Should you do it?
I wish you could read my notes, because I just wrote that down to ask you that.
I love that. Oh Lord, the should you is the biggest question. I was on, fortunately, when I was both at IBM and at Dell, I was on the AI ethics committees there, and I would have things run across my desk all the time. I'm going, it passed 3 other layers of committees and the committee members, and then gets to me, and I'm like, oh no, I see big problems in 5 years with this, or 10 years, or societal. This could cause major issues in Africa. We haven't thought about that from that worldwide perspective, which, I feel fortunate I've been able to work across the globe, and most recently in Africa, and seeing how AI is even affecting the local people who live on dirt with, huts and dirt floors, but they have phones. All of them have phones, so we have to really think globally as we're putting these types of programs in place.
So what kinds of questions or issues does this type of committee usually answer? Like, are they making technical rules, or are they setting kind of policy, or what kind of questions are they answering?
So at the big technical companies, what I'm seeing is, yes, it's going to be a technical play, because they do want to make sure their AI is performing at its top performance. And sometimes the architecture, like a good friend of mine, DJ Rainey, was my chief technology officer when I was at IBM. And DJ was awesome, because he would look at the solution architecture and go, yay, nay, and here's the problems. So it's really important to have the technology side to make sure that it's doing what you believe it's supposed to do. But of course, the data sets on the front end and the data sets on the back end are going to be key. So again, it's making sure that you have within the governance structure individuals who can look at those data sets. And often, like for legal, it's going to be the corporate legal departments that have the best view on employment issues, for example. We had a great team at IBM. They were part, anything that came in on something employment that would be AI created would go through at least one of the lawyers in the team, and of course the rest of the committees, to say, okay, here's the downfalls that possibly could happen from even that data set. And so it's really important to make sure you have, a full team that's having an eye on this. And so the committees can be quite large. I see mostly for my Fortune 1000s, they tend to go out, again, as I said, to all departments, make sure that any of the business lines that they're working with end up having people included that those decisions would affect their day-to-day jobs.
And what about for law firms? What do you recommend for a structure like, let's say, in the AM law, so a top 200 firm that's, reasonably sized?
So the structure that I'm mostly seeing is the CIOs are responsible for taking the ideas that are being, of course, different departments, again, in the AmLaw 100 are going to the CIO saying, hey, I want to create this, or some of them are even techie and they're creating it themselves, running it through the rest of the shareholders. So we're seeing, I've never seen so much back and forth between the technology teams and the shareholders. That is definitely one thing I'm really seeing a lot of lately. And although I will tell you, many of the shareholders that, at least as of legal tech, a couple months ago, when I was asking around, they were saying, no, the shareholders have stopped any use of generative AI. And the issue with that is people are still using it.
Right.
And they're using it because there's not guardrails around the AI. They don't have anything to protect their prompts. They don't have anything that's masking their data. And so AI gets retrained on everything that we train it. An example is, I don't know if anybody caught in the news, but they were saying that ChatGPT was 98% correct on math. Now it's less than 2%. And it's because when you continue to ask really inappropriate or stupid prompts to an AI system, it becomes stupider. And on top of that, if somebody's going back and saying, no, you're wrong, it's this, what happens? It starts to get retrained in a new way. It's like a kid. And, I think if you guys have ever watched the movie Waterboy, and Adam Sandler continually says, mama says, and then finally realizes, mama said I probably shouldn't repeat this, should I? And his girlfriend's like, no. And it is that type of a system where you've got an individual which is your AI, has been trained smart to a certain extent, and then you can either retrain it smarter or give it misinformation, and it honestly, just can wreak havoc.
You hit on so many great things, and one of the things I think is worth reiterating, because we talked about it in the first session with Megan Anzelk. I always screw her last name up. But the idea of just being aware that everything that you're putting into these public models is going back to home base. Super important to know that.
Yeah.
As lawyers, anything you're putting back is going back to home base, unless you're using some sort of private model that your firm has bought or owned and is secured. Just keep that in mind. Very important to know that. The other thing I love that you mentioned, and it was like one of my favorite posts that I had this year, was AI model collapse. Like, I don't know why, I think it's the funniest idea ever that like eventually we can make a model so stupid by feeding it stupid stuff that it just becomes idiotic and useless. Yeah. I don't know why. I think like the fact that we could make something so stupid, we build something so awesome and then we could make it so stupid and eventually becomes useless is, I don't know. It's very human of us.
It really is. It is kind of funny. I used to always tell everyone Watson is 5 when it comes off the line, and then it's really our choice to create Watson who goes to medical school or goes to law school or goes to so we can either make the system smarter or dumber. And I love that like Microsoft's coming out with a generative AI, and I know people are in test phase right now, but it starts out again at a certain point, and then you're training it the rest of the way on your data or on your information. So you start to have that personalized model, although there is the good and the bad from that, because you can also make the personal model so static that it doesn't have information from the outside. So I like it for now. We'll see how that ends up going, and it may need to be trained on some other stuff from the outside to make it smarter, but I think we're getting in a better direction instead of it being out to the ether of 17 terabytes of what? Don't know.
Right, undefined. And so we talked a little bit about that as well on the session, is the idea of like, we have to come up with something in the middle, right? We can't, as legal, necessarily use public, like OpenAI, ChatGPT in its kind of default state, right? Because we can't send confidential data into the public model, right? But if we shut everything off where we're not sending any of our information, that means it's never learning us. So it's never becoming personalized to your firm or your company or whatever. And so there kind of we have to get to a place where there's a Venn diagram of some public information, some public training, but maybe yours takes predominance, or do you have something to add on that that's more intelligible than what I just put together?
No, absolutely. So one of the, part of our solution that we have out to market is a data masker and also the prompt protector, because we don't want the AI being trained on the individual's information that they put in. And so the data master allows that not to happen. And then of course, the prompt protect is for the things we still ask it. Like I said earlier, old, oh my gosh, I know better, but it'll make sure that I don't ask the AI system something like that, because we don't want the AI system learning from my, misprompts. So from that perspective, absolutely. I think, I could say so much more.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about regulations. And if anybody has any questions, I haven't seen any pop up yet. That's because you're crushing it. But if you do, just drop them in the chat. Let's talk about how regulations are going to affect law firms and corporations, and what we can do and what we should do. I mean, I know Europe is kind of freaking everybody out with what they're doing, and the US is trying to do some things, but frankly, we've seen what they've done with social media and privacy, and they have not exactly crushed it yet. So can you give us kind of the 50,000 foot view of what you think what direction we're going in, or how this is going to work out?
Yeah, it is. So I met with my local congressman who's on the Commerce Committee, and they're looking at AI and I loved what he said. He goes, we're not looking at regulating it yet. We just want to learn. And so we have various different, government bodies like the SEC saying, here's our first stab at it. What are your thoughts? And we're having an opportunity to respond to those. Every law firm out there should be reading these and making sure that they are responding with their perspectives. I know they're intense. It's about 250 pages that I saw from the SEC. I just saw one from Commerce. Commerce is looking at other models across the world. They wanted to know what people thought of the G7 AI Hiroshima model. And that's one that my friend Mimi Zhu had done some work with them on when she was in Hiroshima with them. So I actually reached out to her to get her thoughts on it, to say, how do you feel about it? What do you think is missing? US laws, how is that going to be in response here? So reaching out across the pond even and saying, hey, what's working there? We're now looking at your regulations that you have in place to possibly put those in place in the United States. How do you believe that it would work here, and how is it working there? So we really need to do that, both perspectives be responding, but then on the other perspective, make sure we're asking those questions to others who've been regulated for years. I mean, there's, at least the last couple of years that we started to see those AI regulations at least being proposed. And then I believe most of them are going in place early next year.
Right. Yeah, they're going to start landing, and we're going to start seeing what the real impacts are.
Yeah, well, and most law firms are global, at least our top ALM 100. And so their perspective would be, how do you manage it? When I was at Dell, one of the ways that I managed globally was all in one. We're going to take, it's almost like, okay, what's the lowest denominator that we need to make sure we cover across the globe? And then you just start to manage all of your internal regulations or internal rules off of the most stringent regulation, for example, which makes it really tough. But how do you manage, thousands of attorneys across the world and have small IT teams or legal tech teams to really respond to the needs of all the attorneys? And so I think we're going to start seeing more, I guess, that lowest common denominator happening as law firms and corporations try to manage this.
Seems like the only approach, and it's similar to kind of what a lot of international law firms did with GDPR, right? They just kind of said, we're just going to adopt that as our privacy standard, because what the heck are we going to do otherwise, right?
Yeah, I just noticed there is a Q&A, but it said that they think chat is disabled.
Oh, what the H? Oh, all right, let me make that.
So, and I know we've got 9 minutes left, which is not a whole lot of time.
I'm
so for those of you, if that was disabled and you have questions for me, you can always shoot them to me on Messenger. I'm pretty decently active on it. So probably will be more so next week, as this week is a little more travel.
Okay, now I just made it for everyone. So sorry. It's a security thing, so people can't do weird stuff. I have forgotten I have to turn it on every single time. Well, it's because Zoom, there's been some people doing weird things on Zoom.
So, and actually One of the first products I ever saw from my tech team when I was actually even working at Dell was this product that we have called sunscreen, and it actually blocks all the stuff that shouldn't be seen by others. So if somebody chats up something that they shouldn't, it's actually going to block it until you unblock it. So
Oh, see, I prefer that. That's a better
yeah,
way.
yeah, you can't. Yeah, so we have that, which is a pretty cool product, because how many times, oh my gosh, the stuff that happened, especially early on during COVID, I was like, oh, they just shared that. I didn't want to see that. And even
Right.
like a month ago, I had an attorney I was talking to, and he pulled up his entire calendar. I was like, no,
Right. Like, or your whole inbox. I'm like, no, that's too
yeah.
much.
I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm liable to know all your client names and what's going on.
Right. Like, no.
Yeah, don't
What
do that.
about with the regulations? Two questions there. One is, let's say that you're a CIO or a chief innovation officer or someone driving innovation at a law firm or in a corporate, in a corporate setting. And should you be reading these 250-page insanities as well, just to kind of see what's going on and staying abreast of things?
I would if it was me.
Just to kind of see what's coming, like, and what kind of terribleness might be around the corner.
Yeah, the top one I would say would be the G7. If you're going to read any of them, the G7 Hiroshima AI, responsible AI, or I guess proposed regulations, or proposed guidance. Sorry, their guidance there. And anything that the United Nations is putting out recently, they're covering various different regions within the world. So that's going to be important.
All right, here's a question. The question is, as we work out nuances, issues that arise, is that there's zero tolerance for correction in the legal field. That's a really good point. Um, we need a communication plan to socialize this area. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Okay.
Right, that's a deep, big question.
Yeah.
Objection, overly broad. Uh,
I know, actually, that's a really good point. I will tell you, so when I was an e-discovery expert, I think one of the most interesting conversations I had with an attorney was about 3 a.m. when they called me freaking out, going, I'm supposed to ask questions tomorrow to the opposing counsel's witnesses, and I don't understand e-discovery. And he goes, I realized that. And I was like, thank you for telling me, because for months he'd been going like this, shaking his head. I get it. I get it. I get it. And then all of a sudden it was dawn on him. I don't get it. And so I think that we're going to see probably the same blip in the legal industry, where you're going to have a lot of heads nodding, and then eventually they're going to have their trusted advisors that they can reach out to, like me, like you, Cheryl, to go, okay, I just need to be raw with you and help me out. And we became really good friends after that discussion. Before then, I didn't think he liked me so much, but I think he didn't like me because he didn't understand really what was going on. And this is not as complicated as it seems. If we really stay outcome focused, we are going to be much better off. If we can start to put guardrails on the outcomes and not have the wrong outcomes, or outcomes we don't want to go out into society, if we block those from going out, that's where things are going to stay in control. The moment it gets out of control is not going to be a technology problem. It's going to be a human problem, and the humans putting in bad prompts or prompts that we don't want the AI learning from, but then also on the back end, repeating what the AI says that is not correct, or repeating things that are just bias or just bad stuff that we just don't want to get out there.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting though to see, in a field of perfection, perfection, how is a near perfect technology, which none of our technology is perfect, but for some reason we've been kind of telling people that it is, which is hilarious, right? Like, nothing's perfect.
It is not. Well, and one of the questions was, how do we socialize this? One of the things that Larry and I have been working on is this responsible AI reference model. So we're hoping that's going to help some in the marketplace. And there's others who've been coming up with theirs too. We're trying to just come up with something that's very, very simple and pictures. If anyone read my book, E-Discovery Plain and Simple, they'll remember it was a lot of pictures, but it's because the visualizations is what really tends to sink in. And so we've got some nice visualizations that we've been creating to really help get the message across, saying, okay, here's the 7 pillars you need to make sure that you are being responsible towards. And again, it just comes out to the outcomes. Don't worry about the technology. What is it that the technology showed you? How do you feel about that? Have you checked it? Is it right? Is it another Mata versus Ivanka, shock factor where, of the 5 cases that were in the motion that ChatGPT created, 2 of them were just totally made up. Awesome.
And it's funny too, because right now ChatGPT, the public version, won't look at a website anymore. But I remember early on giving it my LinkedIn profile and saying, write me a resume from this, because I was curious what it would do. It made up a whole bunch of stuff about me.
Oh yeah.
And
I've done the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm awesome. I'm like Superwoman. When did that happen?
No, yeah, it was at least 26% made up. So yeah. So as we wrap up, the last question that I had in my mind thinking about regulations is, if you're at a big corporation or you're at like a very large law firm, you probably have some AI like some folks who are used to reading those big 250 page things and then responding to them. But if you're in maybe the second 100 or a smaller firm or a smaller company, you might not have the resources for that. Is that something kind of that your team also, is that something you guys do and there's other companies that do, that kind of work with law firms and say, let us help you respond to this? Are those things that you all do?
Absolutely. Yes. We have a team of PhDs that work with us, and professors, of law schools like Larry, that make sure that we can help support and then really help to make those, the 250 pages plain and simple. So
right.
the summary
probably
that
like
I
8 pages of useful stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. And if anyone wants to read my SEC summary, let me know. I can go ahead and send you over the link to it. It was really 8 pages of a response. But again, I summarized what their statement was and then our response back. So I've got the 250 pages down to about 8 that concern me the most.
See, I just picked 8 out of thin air. I just had a feeling based on how governments write. And then last thing, at the beginning of the session, we were just chatting a little bit about kind of resources that we like going out to kind of get other pieces of information, and not everyone was on yet. I thought it might be useful just to chat through some of those. Some of them were on YouTube and things like that. I'd love to hear who you like listening to and where you're getting some both information that aligns with yours and maybe contrasting information.
So my top 2 right now are YouTube and Telegram. I like Telegram because they're not, I can hear from various authors and they can just fully be authentic. Nothing is getting, there's no issues. They can say what they want to say. Even if it's, inappropriate, they can still say that. So especially the authors that I really enjoy following, Telegram is great. On YouTube, just make sure it's reputable people and it's their actual channel. And I love anyone who's a professor. I really love to follow academia and make sure that I'm listening to them, because they spend their lives researching this stuff. And it's not just the legal academia that's important. It's also, what are we seeing on the technology side and on the AI side? Because there are PhDs out there that people that have PhDs in AI, like Dr. Adel Emissary. He works in the American University of Cairo. He's amazing. He's got a lot of really good insights. Of course, Larry Bridgesmith is one of my favorites, making sure that I'm keeping up with him and others in the industry.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's some great groups on LinkedIn as well for AI and legal. If you're on the corporate side, there's a great one for corporate legal officers. So it's a great, there's lots of resources. I encourage you to plug into other people so that you're hearing different voices and different ideas as time goes on, because this is something, there is an endless supply of money to be made here as well. That's the other cool thing. It's like, if you learn the stuff, you don't have to be an expert, but there's plenty of opportunity to go around.
So
with that,
I have to jump because I do have a corporation I'm supposed to be meeting with right now. So
excellent.
Yes, we'll go
thank
talk.
You all so much
Thank
you for joining us, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, and we will all see you next week.
Thank you, Cheryl. This has been fun. I look forward to hearing from you all.
Great.
Bye.